And so the VA loan is the most, it is the best primary residence mortgage on the market. There's nothing else that beats it. I will fight that fight with anybody, and I'll do it with numbers, I'll do it with logic, and I'll do it with opportunity cost. I mean, just yesterday, someone posted a win in the group that they got a VA appraisal increased by $15,000 on the reconsideration. And I've seen most of the lenders I work with say there's like a 55 or 60% on average that works with a reconsideration of value with the VA loan. Most of them have not done maybe but one tops with a non-VA loan. And they're like, yeah, it's less than 10%, if any. Like I had one guy who's like, I've done 15 that came back approved to raise the appraisal price with the VA loan, and not a single time has it ever worked on the conventional side because the process for the VA is better and the interest rates are better.
Welcome to Real Talk with San Diego Steve, where we're on a mission to empower first-time home buyers, investors in the San Diego military community. Our goal? To provide you with actionable insights and strategies to achieve financial freedom through real estate. Each episode, we spotlight inspirational stories to give you a tool for your real estate toolbox. Whether you're just starting out or looking to elevate your real estate journey, you're in the right place. I'm Stephen Bernard, your favorite San Diego agent and investor, and your host. And today we have a special guest who embodies the spirit of transformation and tenacity, Dave Pere. A Marine, Dave has navigated the tides of both financial challenges and choosing to become a beacon in the realm of real estate. His story is a vibrant tapestry of disciplined, continuous learning and strategic investing, offering invaluable lessons for both veterans and novice investors alike. So join us as we dive into David's journey from military to millionaire, wink, uncovering the strategies, mindsets, and principles that propelled him from military service to real estate success. Dave, thanks for being here today.
You're using all these words that are too big for Marines to understand. So before we get into anything serious, we've got to just, on the back of your wall, for anyone who's listening and not watching, he has a bunch of national parks. The centerpiece of one being Yosemite. And if you've not been to Yosemite National Park, you absolutely should. But San Diego Steve is going to get to learn something about Dave that I learned the very first time I brought a girl home for dinner in high school when I was 16. I didn't know this prior to that, and somehow this came up as good dinner conversation, you know. It's kind of my upbringing, but I was conceived in the back of a 1988 Toyota pickup in 1989 in Yosemite Valley.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So you were always destined for greatness.
Yeah.
Do you know which part of the park? Because that may lead some insight to who you are.
I want to say it was over by, I can't remember the name of the, it wasn't Tuolumne Meadows, but I think it was over by whatever little waterfall hike, dinky waterfall hike you can camp next to. But I can't remember the name of it. I've done the hike, but I've not done Half Dome. I don't know that I have a desire to do Half Dome, but my dad has. He used to live, my dad. We won't go too far into detail, but suffice it to say, my dad drove a car off a 1974 Nova off of a cliff in Yosemite once.
Oh,
so
that's awesome.
he's had some moments out there. So yeah,
he's one of the valley. He's one of the legends of the valley. Yeah, and right above the Yosemite thing right here. This is Teddy Roosevelt and John Muir over on Glacier Point. Yosemite is like my favorite place over there.
Yeah, Yosemite is awesome for sure. Then I see the Grand or Bryce Canyon, which is in Zion, right? And then I can't see the rest of them.
It's close to Zion. Yeah, my wife and I kind of did a little Western National Park drive-through. You know, one Holiday Palm. And it was just like we were in Utah and we're like, why the heck not? You know, Grand Canyon, Zion, Bryce Canyon. Yeah. We did it all.
And my dad's goal in retirement is to hit every national park in the country.
Really? Starting where?
Oh man, he's probably got half of them done already. So I don't know. I guess Yosemite would have been the start, but to technically, but yeah, I don't know. They've been all over. They did Bryce and a couple others this year. They actually drove all the way
Okay.
to fucking Alaska. So
Oh, to do like Denali.
yeah, my brother was
Yeah,
doing
that's
was a tour guide up there for the summer. He has been for like the last 3 years. And it's funny. My mom and dad. My mom texted a picture to. So I have a brother, sister, and then my dad. And my mom texted a picture to all of us 2 days ago. My sister shared it on Instagram. I think I reshared it, but it was three sticky notes on her desk, and it was like Shannon in Guatemala from this date to this date in December, and then over the same week, Michael in Colorado from this date to this date, and David in Colombia from this date to all overlapping the same week. All three of us are completely different parts of the country and or in other countries, and I was like, it makes, like, my sister's like, yeah, it makes sense for why you were so confused about who was going where when. I was like, all three of us over the same week are gonna be. It's like, yeah, that makes sense. Pretty funny.
that's hilarious. Well, Dave, I just kind of want to dive into it. Our with our goal, kind of educating the military community here in San Diego. That is your speciality of sorts across the country. And I kind of want to ground your story in your beginning, kind of where you relate to everyone. Can you tell us, your real estate journey, really starting from you being in the Marine Corps and what you experienced?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, basically, I joined the Marine Corps because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to leave Arkansas, and I didn't have money for school, and I didn't like school. And then I joined. I made all the typical mistakes, right? Blew all my money on all the normal things, and it wasn't until 2000. That was '08 that I joined. It wasn't until 2015 that I started to get into real estate and financial freedom. And it was because someone handed me Rich Dad Poor Dad. I read it and I was like, oh, wow, this stuff's actually kind of cool. Let me buy a duplex and try this. And I lived in one side, rented the other side. And then very quickly found that it was all it was cracked up to be. Like, once I moved out and it started paying me a little bit, I was like, wow, this is really cool. Even now, with like interest rates crunching up and everything, I'm still doing just fine with my rentals, and it's been good. So I kind of doubled down on real estate and my TSP. And 6 years later, I was able to walk out of the military and kind of go do my own thing.
Yeah, that was the Wave Tops version, right? The What did you experience as a Marine, though? Like, why real estate? What made you dive into, like, hey, I need to be doing something else. Maybe there's something else for me outside of the military.
Um, it's a good question. I think I don't know if it was so much that I needed to be doing something else outside of the military as that I just wanted to make sure that when I was done with the military in whatever capacity, I didn't have to go take a W-2. And I
Mm.
think that was in part just because I was stuck on recruiting duty. I tried out for special forces and I blew out my, not I wouldn't say my knee, but I tore my IT band in my left knee. And they were like, it was a DOR. So anyone listening, yes, it was a DOR. I won't try to pretend it was some crazy medical, like, denial thing. But when you're coming out of land nav with your rifle splinted to your leg because you can't hold your own body weight, kind of makes sense to DOR and try again. And they told me I could come back in 6 months. And then in that 6 months, I got HISted, as they call it, which I don't remember, high something screening team special something. I don't know. They give it some fancy name to basically say it's the gotcha list for recruiting duty or drill instructor. They're like, you're going to be a drill instructor or you're going to be a recruiter. And then you're kind of screwed. You basically have to, like, pitch why you should be one or the other and or why you're ineligible. And then they don't care and they give you whatever. So I got
Classic
stuck on
military
recruiting
story.
duty. Yeah, exactly. So I got stuck on recruiting duty, and that first year or two was just rough. It was weird. Like, I ended up at a station that was short one or two recruiters. Within 9 months, I was the most senior recruiter in the station, and it was just very strange scenario. It was rough. It was a lot of long hours. I mean, anyone who's ever been on recruiting duty, like, talking 80 to 120 hours a week. And people can laugh all they want and say, yeah, right. But I distinctly remember walking through a Walmart after midnight in my Deltas with a master sergeant who was down there for training and like talking to the box boys, and then having to be back in the office at like 7 or 8 the next morning. So yeah, it was a lot of hours. And it just wasn't fun. And so I was like, man, I want, like, when someone started talking about this stuff, I'm like, I want the ability to kind of do my own thing. Like, I want some freedom. And then the more time went on, the more it was just like Marine Corps wasn't as fulfilling as when I was younger and we were in combat. Like, it just got more office work. The more you get promoted and the more, good, the better you are at your job, presentations and articulating things, the closer you work to the flag. And so I ended up, I got passed over for going to Dubai 2 years in a row because they wanted me to stay closer to the general and do, PowerPoints and briefings and stuff. And it was just unfulfilling. And I was like, it's time to move on. I haven't left the country. And at the time I hadn't left the country in 10 years. So I was in for 13. The first 4 years, I went to 13 countries. First 3 years, I guess. And then the last like 9.5, 10 years that I was in the service, I hadn't left the country at all. And then,
Wow.
I got out of the military in 21. I've been to Peru, Colombia, Guatemala, Costa Rica. Yeah, in a year and a half. So, I got a lot of work to do, but.
Hey guys, it's your break with San Diego Steve. If you're getting value from this real estate talk, please smash that like button, drop a comment below with your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to keep up with the smartest real estate moves in San Diego. Act now, and let's build your real estate empire together.
So, I got a lot of work to do, but.
It was all lifestyle design. But what about the investing part? How were you financially in the Marine Corps? Was that always naturally something you were good at?
I mean, if you count investing in like tattoos, depreciating motor vehicles, spending money trying to get women's attention, and buying booze or protein supplements, I was great at investing. The return on those is not great. In fact, we just sent out an email yesterday about like kind of financial ideologies or whatever that helped me succeed. And we used the picture of the dude from one of the, I forget what movie, RV movie, where he's got the no regrets tattoo across his chest. And that's kind of how I feel about that first like 7 years. Like, I had a great time. I don't know that I would change much if I went back, but I definitely could make a few small tweaks and live almost the same lifestyle and be in a much better financial position right now than I am. But hindsight's 2020. So I mean, at that time, I had a pretty much a negative net worth. I think I had $10 or $15,000, maybe 20 in the TSP in 2015. But I had, a $10,000 note on a Honda S2000. I had a $7,000 note on a Harley. I had, if you boiled it all out and count firearms, maybe I had a positive net worth, but it was nothing I could spend, that's for sure. I mean, I was paycheck to paycheck and paycheck to paycheck and paycheck to paycheck. And in fact, the only reason I was able to afford the down payment on the FHA loan for my first duplex is because my Harley got totaled by a guy who owned a car dealership and couldn't afford the hit on his insurance. So he cut me a check for full value of the bike. And then I was also able to sell the bike remainder. It was totaled, but it was still drivable. Like, I drove it home that night. It was like the handlebar was like candy caned around, and I'm like driving, like, it was stupid. Shouldn't have driven it home. I wasn't on the bike when it happened. It was parked in a parking lot. He was next to me. He backed out and like sideswiped it and knocked it under another vehicle, and it was only really totaled because the front fork was bent. But I made it home. I only lived like 2 miles away, and sold the rest to the Harley dealership. So I was thinking about selling the bike for like $8,500, and he cut me a check for $8,500, and then the Harley dealership gave me like $3,000 for the rest of it, which means that over the course of putting 12,000 miles on that bike, I really only spent $2,000 on it because I think I bought it at 13. So I mean, like, realistically, it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but had it not been for that situation, when they came, hey, we need $4,000 to close on this house, I would have had to really figure out, like, I probably would have had to borrow it from my TSP because I didn't have it. So it's very interesting.
And it was what was so you read Rich Dad Poor Dad, right? That wasn't necessarily the catalyst, or was it, into real estate? Because, or did you have a moment while the, motorcycle was being pushed under another vehicle where, your future flashed in your eyes, and you're like, oh, this is it. I need a down payment. This is my moment.
Oh no, I was in the bar eating a cheeseburger and drinking a beer when that happened. So he came in and he's like, who owns the Harley out front? And he's like, I may or may not have, which is good. It's a good thing that he came in, because I absolutely would have gone after with the video footage. I would have pressed charges, and he had definitely been drinking. So instead it was like, high five, handshake, whatever. And I just trusted the fact that if I showed up at his office on Monday, I'd get a check, because also I had footage. So if not, I would get it, I'd get my money back one way or the other. No, Rich Dad Poor Dad was more just like, it took a boring subject and made it interesting enough to finish the book and actually understand like why passive income or cash flow has the ability to give you freedom of movement, freedom of thought, freedom of whatever. And I think I'd always had a little bit of that entrepreneurial bug. Like, I mean, my mom always likes to tell the story of when I was in high school, I thought it'd be cool to make like cat of nine tails whips out of like fishing line, rocks, and a good solid stick, and I would sell them on like the street. And nice enough one person bought one from me just to say good job, but like, that's of course not as lucrative as a lemonade stand, but what do you know? And so I always had a little bit of the bug, I think. And when I got on recruiting duty, I actually tried to buy a house, but I had a bunch of people try to talk me out of it. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know the investing side. And I was just looking to buy a house at the time. Like, maybe I'll live in one and fix it up. So when he starts talking about cash flow and real estate, I'm like, well, that's cool. So then I kind of went down the purple library rabbit hole of Rich Dad Poor Dad books. And after that, I would be, anytime I didn't understand a word, I'd Google it. And I just kept finding this Bigger Pockets thing. So finally, I would just go to Bigger Pockets and ask questions. And then eventually I became a Bigger Pockets Pro member. I mean, man, it's funny. I remember, I read the books, like book on rental property investing, No and Low Money Down, Property Managing, all by Brandon Turner and his wife. And then I bought the Duplex. But I still remember in that first like year or two of investing, the first like, when I enrolled in like Bigger Pockets Pro and paid, and it was like $200 or $300 for the year. And that was like a huge decision for me. Like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to afford this. I think it's worth it, but like, what if I don't get the money back? What if there's no return? What if? And it's kind of crazy to think what I spend now in like services and education. Comparatively, it's interesting to put that in perspective. But yeah, that was a nerve-wracking thing at the time.
Was it worth it?
I mean, you wait till you see the short that comes out about how much travel I did this year. Like it's crazy. I probably spent more than my previous military salary on traveling this year. I've been to, I'd say I'm probably close to 25 states this year alone, and then 3 countries. So, I mean, was it worth it? Maybe, it's a good time. I wouldn't say life is like full of like stress-free, whatever. Everything has its own issues. There's always something. But yeah, I mean, it's given me the freedom to choose, which is nice.
So you have the education, you got the down payment, and you said you got a duplex first. Could you kind of walk us through those first couple initial investments into the real estate world?
Yeah, the first property is a duplex. It was a 2-1 on each side, no garage, had a storage shed for each unit, and it was, I want to say they were like 950 square feet each side, something like that. This is in 2015 in Springfield, Missouri, so prices are obviously not there anymore, but I paid $79,000 for it. And then with an FHA loan, I put, 3.5% down. I think I was all into that house, including new LVP on the side that I moved into, right around $4,000.
Oh, wow.
And And so, yeah, it wasn't bad. And what it was, the proof of concept came with, I was paying $550 a month to live in a 2-1 at the time that wasn't quite as nice. Like, didn't have a dishwasher. Mine had a dishwasher. Didn't have a storage unit. Mine had a storage unit. Also wasn't mine. Like, I wasn't making any payments down on the mortgage. There were a lot of, it was just an apartment complex. And $550 a month for a 2-1 was fine. And it was a good place, and it was like I could have thrown a rock at my recruiting station, so it was very convenient. And then I moved into this thing. I'm gonna mess up all my math here, but I think the mortgage, like the total principal, interest, taxes, insurance, pity mortgage was $585, maybe $595, but I think it was $585. And the other unit was currently rented for $475. And so, I'm like, all right, I'm out like $125 a month now. Plus, any maintenance or vacancy or repairs or CapEx. But I mean, I was basically saving $325 a month by doing this. I was like, all right, well, that's cool. And then, I'm getting paid that BAH anyway. So like saving $325 a month is sweet. And then when I moved out, I rented my unit out for like $500. And now I'm cash flowing whatever that math is, like $150. And then over time, the rents went up, and if I hadn't refied, I'd be crushing it on that thing. But I refied and then I sold it. But I ultimately, I bought it for $79. I sold it for $165. And
that was only recently, right?
Yeah, I sold it earlier this year, I think. It all blends together at this point. But yeah, I think it was like February, March. So, it was 6 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And what do you feel like you learned with that first investment? Or what I guess you did it because of, the trajectory. You understood the value, right? But what were kind of the learning points that, you want to make sure everybody understands with the first view? It doesn't just have to be that first duplex.
Man, looking back on that one, it's a pretty simple transaction. I love house hacking. I wish that I'd bought a fourplex. I was nervous. I didn't know what I was getting into. What if it doesn't work? The reality is with real estate, unless you buy in like the worst market ever, if you just hold on long enough, even if you don't buy right, you'll be okay. I've got a property or two right now that I refinanced at like the height of appraisals, and I pulled out probably more money than I should have. I wouldn't say I'm underwater on them, but I'm definitely not like sitting pretty on equity. And who cares? Because they cash flow, not much, but they cash flow. And I'm going to hold on to them long enough that, 10 years, 20 years from now, I'm not going to care that I pulled an extra $5,000 out, because they will double in value, or even if they only go up 25% in value. The beautiful thing with it is, like, let's say you buy it FHA and you're 3.5% down. If the market doubles, you're not doubling your 3.5%. You're doubling 100%. So you're doubling what the bank gave you too. So if you factor that out, that's 79% or 79K to 165 over 6 years, and it's really only like 5.5 years. That's probably like a 13 or 14% return, or the equivalent of, had I stuck $79,000 into an index fund that earned like 13 or 14%, but I didn't. I stuck $4,000 in. And, there's some maintenance throughout and some whatever. So let's call it $10,000. But I took $10,000 and turned it into 85 minus commissions. So probably 75. So 7.5x, in as many years. It's crazy.
I don't think you could find a fund for 750% return on investment.
No, absolutely not. And you compress it over 5.5, 6 years, it's 300%. I mean, it's still a crazy ROI. And so I wish that I'd gone bigger sooner. I knew in my heart that the market was in a good spot. Where I lived was low pricing. And I was like, it's not an appreciation game, it's a cash flow game. It's all well and good, but at some point it is an appreciation game. And so, had I just bought more earlier, I would have been sitting real pretty right now.
Yeah. I mean, the best time to buy real estate is yesterday, right? The next best time is today.
Yeah. And everybody's always worried about what the market's going to do. And I get it, but like it's the same thing as dollar cost averaging on index funds. Like pick a strategy, stick to it, buy, and then if you just plan on holding long term, you'll be okay one way or another.
Mm-hmm. So at what point along your journey did you decide to pivot into making your own community? Because you run one of the biggest education and military community platforms for real estate investing in the country. The biggest, probably.
It's the biggest in the world, yeah.
Yeah.
Unless there's some foreign one that I don't know about, but it doesn't count because it's not ours, America. It wasn't really a decision. In 2018, a friend of mine told me, like, I was asking him how to write a book, and he was like, you should start a blog. Like, great, what should I blog about? And he's like, I don't know, you do real estate, you're in the military. A lot of other people in the military do real estate. Good. You'd think I hadn't just drank this. Maybe these Rippets don't have what they used to, or maybe I should just try sleeping at night.
Yeah, I was gonna say for anyone watching or listening, Dave has not slept, and we had our first call this morning 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, we're on a roll.
I think
this
I
coffee
think you
break
get the pass
is needed.
on this one.
I also total side trail. I also have this theory that I have a nasal passage issue or something, because I have for my entire life, like if I talk at like prolonged lengths of time, I will just start yawning. It's like my body's not getting enough oxygen. Or if I'm like working out or whatever, like I'll be the guy like doing deadlifts and yawning, and like I'm like hyped, and like I don't know, I'm like, man, I don't think there's something there, but I don't know what it is. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. Where were we on that?
We were talking about how for Military to Millionaire is the biggest in the world and greatest of all time.
Yeah, so you recommend starting this blog, and I'm like, all right. So I start. Basically, it was just documenting what I was learning. So whenever I learned something new, I would I'd go and I'd write an article about it and share it with the world, and the world being my mom and like two friends, and then eventually people started to they'd comment, but they would just ask questions. Be like, hey, what about this, or how do you do this? And if I had heard the same question 2 or 3 times, I would take it and I would go write an article on it, and then I would publish it, and I'd be like, hey, here's the answer, and I'd do some content, and that just kind of blew up. The Facebook community was slow and steady growing, and then one day in 2020, I believe, it went from like 100 people a week joining to like 100 people a day, 200 a day, 300 a day. It's kind of slowed down a little bit again, but Facebook themselves was really pushing the community for me, which was awesome.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember following you way back when, where we would have the lunch break Dave videos in the car talking about real estate.
Yeah, when I worked in a skiff and I wasn't allowed to bring my phone inside, so I'd go sit in the car on lunch breaks. Yeah, good times.
Yeah. And what do you think the members of your community get out of joining? What has it become today? It's not just Dave speaking into the void of the internet.
Yeah, I mean, they just get to hang out with me. That's really all people want. They get a community of people that's not pitching a million things and trying to take all their money. The one part of the community that's paid, the war room, every member in the group has basically told me to raise the price on it for new members. So I think it's definitely worth the money. I don't think there's the issue with like what I was afraid of with bigger pockets. I'm not afraid. Like I don't like high ticket stuff. I don't want to charge for a lot of stuff, but 4 years we haven't had a single person ask for the 30-day money back guarantee, and no one's ever told me that it wasn't worth the money. So I'll take that as a win. But the that's like the paid part, but the free part of the community, I mean, basically any question you have, finance related, real estate related, investing related, if I don't have the answer, one of my moderators doesn't have the answer, then we push you to somebody that has the answer and isn't just trying to like pad their pockets. And so it's just a really good space for bouncing ideas off people and getting answers for stuff, especially with the VA loan. There's so many misnomers out there with the VA loan. And so we partnered up with the vetted VA team, some of the most knowledgeable lenders in the country. And we actually have 8 of their lenders as moderators in the Facebook group to help validate information. So it's really cool.
Dive into that a little bit, because I want to, being the person in the community, being the person that you are in the community that you have, you're, through experience, one of the more knowledgeable people out there in the creative uses of VA entitlements, as well as, just military benefits, whether we're talking leveraging your TSP, how you invest in that, yada, yada, yada. So can you kind of speak to, what you want people to take away with the VA loan product and other entitlements that they have as a part of our military community?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is anyone who's trying to talk to you about rolling your TSP into some great vessel so you can invest is most likely got their own interest at heart more than yours. There are a few situations where like moving your thrift savings plan into like a self-directed IRA might make sense for you, but there's not a better vessel than the TSP for where to keep your money long term. And from a fee structure perspective, it eats at your returns way less than any other group out there. Vanguard would be a close second, but there's plenty of people out there who want you to roll your TSP into whole life insurance policies or self-directed IRAs, and they're all commission based, right? All of those people that are pushing that are getting something for pushing that. And so, that's why I always recommend like talking to a fee only advisor, where it's like you pay them $100, $200, $300, and then they give you advice and then you leave and that's it, rather than like you pay them $100, $200, $300, or you don't pay them and they get commission off what they recommend, because those guys, their interests are skewed. They don't align with yours because they get paid on what they pitch, not on just helping you. And I think that's good to know just in the back of your head. But from the VA, man, there's so much. I mean, suffice it to say, the best way to sum it up is, if an agent and or lender is telling you that the VA loan's not competitive, not good, you should use something else, I can almost guarantee it's because they don't understand it. And they would rather push you to someone to a product that they do understand than just say, hey, I'm not the best professional for you. Go talk to this guy. Again, commission eyes, right? They want that check for talking to you, and they don't always, because they have a fiduciary responsibility on like insurance people. That fiduciary responsibility in their head might not be push them to somebody else. It might be, oh, well, I can help them kind of with this other thing. And so the VA loan is it is the best primary residence mortgage on the market. There's nothing else that beats it. I will fight that fight with anybody, and I'll do it with numbers, I'll do it with logic, and I'll do it with opportunity cost. I mean, just yesterday, someone posted a win in the group that they got a VA appraisal increased by $15,000 on the reconsideration. And I've seen most of the lenders I work with say there's like a 55 or 60% on average that works with a reconsideration of value with the VA loan. Most of them have not done maybe but one tops with a non-VA loan. And they're like, yeah, it's less than 10%, if any. Like I had one guy who's like, I've done 15 that came back approved to raise the appraisal price with the VA loan, and not a single time has it ever worked on the conventional side, because the process for the VA is better and the interest rates are better. If there's loan level pricing adjustments for loans, and normally it's at like 740, 680, and 640 on your credit score. So if you got a 741 credit score and I have a 739 credit score and we're using a conventional loan, you're going to get a better interest rate than I am, because that is going to adjust below 740. With the VA loan, it doesn't adjust the first time until 640. So someone with a 641 credit score would in theory have the exact same interest rate as someone with an 800 credit score on the VA loan. And so anyone below 740 is going to have a better rate with the VA than they would with an FHA or a conventional. There's no credit requirement, so you can go as low as you want. Most lenders won't do that, but I've seen as low as 540. I've heard about 520, but I've seen as low as 540 you get approved for a loan. There's no debt to income requirement. So like in an expensive market like yours, you can go past the 50% debt to income ratio, which no other product will do on a primary residence. And I've seen 70 something percent back end DTI on a $2 million duplex up in Venice Beach that the guy's now up 700,000 in equity on. So there's just a lot of, everyone talks about the inspection. I've helped tons of people with this. I've yet to see a house fail for an inspection. I mean, if you're obviously trying to move into a crack house, okay, but they do have a renovation loan for that, so you could still do it. But with like a normal house, I have yet to see a property go out of contract because of an inspection. And the FHA is worse.
Yeah. How many times have you used your VA entitlement in your purchase, in your investing?
I hate that question.
Is it one of those that we don't want the answer to be out in the world?
I've never used it.
Wow.
Yeah, that's part of why I'm so passionate about this. All right, so now we got to give the actual answer because everyone's gonna be like, "Dave's a fraud." So I use the FHA.
In the military, bro?
Yeah. I have coins. There's coins back there. I used the FHA on my first duplex because the lender sat me down and said, "You don't want to waste your VA loan on this. You only get one," which is obviously incorrect. You can use it multiple times, but I was like, oh shit, I only get one. Fuck, I don't want to use the VA loan on an $80,000 duplex. He's right. I should save that for, a real nice house later on down the road, like if I go to San Diego or something. And so I used the FHA. Then we moved to Hawaii. That was where I got stationed next, and the VA loan limit was $725, and there was nothing on my side of the island under $800. We made 6 offers. I couldn't convince my wife at the time to move to the other side of the island because she was like 6 months pregnant. She's like, "You're not doing a 40-minute commute each way, blah, blah, blah." So we ultimately just moved on base. When I got to San Diego, the limit for first-time use, which there's no longer, that didn't get changed until January 1st of 2020. I moved in July of 2019, and I signed a 2-year lease on an apartment, it was a single family like condo, but I rented it for 2 years so that basically I was like, hey, I want to be able to rent out bedrooms. If you let me rent out bedrooms on Airbnb when my family's out of town, I'll sign a 2-year lease today. And they agreed. We were the first people to ever occupy that property. It was really nice. I actually got to pick if I wanted real or fake grass when we moved in. Like, that's how new it was. Picked fake because I'm, why would I want to mow grass that I don't need to? And so that was a great place, and I borderline cash flowed. I mean, I was like, I think I brought in like on average $2,700 from Airbnb, and my rent was $3,000, but I had BAH, so I was pocketing $3,000 a month in BAH. So it was still a great deal, but I didn't use the VA loan because at the time the limit was still in existence, and so you could only go up to in San Diego County like $800,000 or $900,000. And so I couldn't get into a duplex, a triplex, a fourplex. And I was like, dude, I don't like where the market's at in 2019. I was like, we're really high in the cycle. I'm kind of not convinced that San Diego isn't going to drop again in price. And, I can't buy a fourplex. If I could buy a fourplex, I'd make that bet all day because I'd be cash flowing or living very close to free and whatever. Even if I could buy a duplex or a triplex, I'd be interested. But the limit was still there, so I couldn't. And I was like, I'm not buying a single family house where I can't house hack it here in San Diego County. I don't trust where the market's at right now, and I don't like California tenant laws. And then lo and behold, the limit got dropped 6 months later, and I was in a lease, so I couldn't do anything about it. And COVID hit, so I was fucking ridiculously wrong about where the market went because I had a neighbor who bought their house within the same quarter that I moved into my rental. He bought a house in that neighborhood, and when he sold it right around the same time I left, he cleared over $200,000. And so I'm like, man, if I just bought this damn house, I would have been way on top. But hindsight, right? So then I get out of the military. I move back to Missouri. Real estate's affordable. Let's use a VA loan. We buy this 4,800 square foot house that I'm in right now. And with my very best friend, who was my roommate, being my lender, who was one of the best lenders out there at the time, we could not get it done because I did what every other real estate investor does. I write off my income. So when I leave the Marine Corps, I'm no longer bankable. And I literally had to gift $17,000 to my then wife, who's on a $50,000, or whatever, counseling, like high school counselor job as a teacher. Had to gift her $17,000 so she could pay 5% down on a conventional primary residence loan with me not being tied to the mortgage. So I had to buy it with just her name, and gift her the money so that my expenses didn't get brought in and ruin the deal. And then 6 months later, we refinanced it into an investor loan. And so this thing's on a like 7% interest, 25-year AM investor loan, as opposed to a 2.5-3% 30-year VA loan. I'm paying $1,000 a month more than I need to. And it's hilarious because at the time I had probably $2 or $3 million worth of mortgages. My roommate saw the income I was making, and there was just nothing we could do to make the numbers pan out because you couldn't count half of it because I was writing everything off, and I did a cost seg that year, and so I looked like I lost money. And now I'm just kind of like, well, I've got this thing, and one of two things is going to happen. I'm going to do a really crazy, cool, like new build out here and then refi into the VA and cash out, or I'm going to just, at this point, just save it. And like, if I decide in like 4 years I'm moving to Maui or something, then I'll pull the trigger because there's no limit. So I'm like, yeah. So it's kind of funny because it's like, I'm probably the most publicly known figure when it comes to the VA loan. And I've helped people at this point buy over $200 million worth of real estate with it. And I haven't used it. But I'm passionate about it because it's like I've had all these issues with it.
And yeah, I feel like you've learned every lesson there is to learn about using the VA loan and at what point in, like, I mean, even going down to the bankability stuff, like the strength of the W-2 while you're in the military, leveraging that tool to secure a future through real estate is insanely powerful, right? So, I mean, arguably, all of your advice is from a place of more wisdom than just the experience of using it a couple of times can give. I wanted to talk about San Diego too because of your initial strategy with it. So you were up at Pendleton, right?
I was twice actually.
Okay. With the let's frame it this way. If you were starting this year, right, or 2023, new part of the market, high interest rate environment, cost of living has not gone down, has gone up, and you're in San Diego in the military, what would your take be on real estate, and how would you navigate?
Well, don't buy it. Obviously, you just you just live in a box somewhere and call it a day, curl up, admit defeat. It's it's a weird spot because I mean 4 years ago, well, shit, time has gone by a lot faster than 4 years and some change ago. I decided, because I thought the market was at the top of the market cycle, that and because there was a cap and all these other things, that it didn't make sense for me. I didn't like the tenant laws and whatever. But the reality is, like now with no limit, if you can get into a duplex, triplex, fourplex and find a way to cash flow it, and by cash flow it, in San Diego, you're not going to get, I mean, maybe there are ways to do this, but it's not easy. But you're most likely not going to get paid to live in your fourplex. But you're going to have to pay to live somewhere. So let's say your BAH is $3,000. I don't know what it is right now. It's probably gone up a little bit, but let's say it's $3,000 in San Diego County. And the average place that you're going to find is between $2,500 and $3,500, whatever. If you are now coming out of pocket $1,000 a month to own that fourplex, you're saving $1,500 to $2,500 on what you would have been paying to live somewhere, while simultaneously your tenants are paying down your mortgage. And let me tell you, on a $1.2 million mortgage, even at a high interest rate, they're paying off a significant chunk of that every month. We're talking probably close to $2,000 or $3,000 in principal pay down, if not more, honestly, on the property. And so you're going to get, let's say it's $2,000 and you're paying $1,000. Well, now you're getting paid $1,000 a month to own that thing, but it's just going into your equity. I mean, the tenant payment, like it's just, in my head, house hacking is the way to go. And you can do it with a big single family where you rent bedrooms out. So if you're a single guy and you want to do, like, you're a young officer, you want to buy like a 5 or 6 bedroom house and rent bedrooms out to other single lieutenants, like that works great too. I just like the duplex to fourplex model because it's something that you can do with family. Or you can still rent bedrooms out. Like I had a buddy who bought a fourplex, and he rented 3 units and then 2 of the 3 bedrooms out of his unit. And he was making, not a ton, but he was making a couple $100 a month on top of pocketing all of his BAH. So house hacking is my favorite strategy, especially in an expensive market. And the thing is, with the market's wonky. Nobody knows what it's going to do. But the rates, like prices didn't drop that much when rates rose, which tells me that the inventory issue still, like supply and demand, is still probably the leading factor. And I would not be surprised if when rates go down, that all these people who have been like hungry because they missed the boat on the last go jump into the market and prices go back up. So I don't really know what all that looks like, but
Yeah, I mean, to kind of frame the postulate, right? A couple weeks ago, we had a 0.5% decrease in the base rate, and in San Diego that week we lost 1/10 of our inventory. Not 1/10 of the inventory sold, as in so much of the inventory sold that the inventory writ large for the month went down. And I think that's just the nature of San Diego.
Yeah, that's nuts. You gotta love it.
So what? Now you started the community. How did you scale in real estate to where you are now? And what did you learn along the way?
A lot of it was just understanding like creative financing and just figuring out how to make deals work low leverage or high leverage. So I was not financially endowed, so to speak. So I had to be creative. I had to do, hey, will you carry 10% of this so I only have to come out of pocket 5% down? Or will you consider seller financing the whole thing? Or like all the creative stuff. But then I also found either partners or a local lender that does 15% down on stuff. And so, there were various things there that were, working in my favor. And I think it was just tenacity, right? I was hungry. I knew what I wanted. And it was, I don't know, you don't have a ton of money, so you just try to make things work in a very creative fashion. How did I scale? I actually started hunting off-market deals, doing some wholesaling. So I would, I'd buy a wholesale deal, and then I'd flip one or burr one, and then I'd sell another wholesale deal and flip one or burr one. And so I'd try to like wholesale 2 and then keep 1, or wholesale 2 and keep 2, or and do some marketing and keep stuff like that going. And it was good. It was fun. I got rid of that business just because it was kind of my online stuff was started to take off, and I didn't want to have my time split between both things, because wholesaling is a business you have to keep feeding the beast. Woo. Yeah, keep feeding the beast, and so you're never like off the clock, and I didn't like that side of it.
So you felt like instead of just having a business that could run itself, you had created another job for yourself that wasn't necessarily sustainable.
Yeah.
Got it. Can you tell us more about creative financing? Because I actually haven't had someone on this show talk to things you could do in real estate that I think you have done. Seller financing, sub 2, all that stuff or whatever it is that you do. The creative financing world.
I do whatever gets the deal done. But most of what I've done, I've done a lease option. I've never gotten a sub 2 to the closing table. My title company always manages to try to change it to an assumption, or there's always something that comes up. But that's probably just a lack of knowledge on my part. But yeah, I've done a lease option. But most of what I've done is involved seller financing. So like, the second real investment property I ever bought was a 10 unit. And when the inspections came back, we went back and forth on stuff. And I had gotten him to agree to pay 10% down to carry 10% as seller financing. So that I only had to come out of pocket 5%, because otherwise I wasn't going to be able to close. And the bank missed that memo And instead of bringing 80% to closing, they brought 85. And so they were like, well, you can either wait for us to redo all the paperwork or you can go get a smaller check and close. I was like, done. So I brought $10,990 to the closing table for that deal. And then 4 years later to the day, I sold it for 127.5 over what I bought it for. And so that was a good example. I've had some where it's like, we couldn't come to terms on price. I was stuck at like 33 grand for this house that had a grease fire in the kitchen, and the seller had come down from 50 something, and he was hung up on 38. And so he's at 38 grand. I'm at 33. Neither one of us is willing to budge anymore. And I'm just like, what if I bought it from you, but we didn't make any payments until we sold the place? He's like, what would that look like? I'm like, well, just as seller financing, 0% down, no interest, and no payments for, call it 12 months. And then I'll balloon it at the 12-month mark. And he's like, okay. And so, yeah, we renovated the house and sold it and then paid him out. We actually went over the 12-month mark, so I actually paid him out like a month before we sold the house, but we were already under contract. So timeline still kind of works. It would have worked better had we gotten it done a month prior and sold, but it was a really cool strategy because it was like, I don't have to have any capital out. I'm not paying interest on it for that 12 months.
Now, when you're getting ready to approach a seller with with seller financing propositions, how do you identify what problem you're looking to solve with outside of just closing on the property, right? Like, hey, this works really well for you and what you want. And what does that paperwork look like?
Yeah, the seller financing paperwork's pretty simple. You just lay out the terms in the contract. I had like a 1-page agreement, and it would just be like down payment, loan term, balloon, yes or no, and what year, interest rate, prepayment penalty. Like, those are pretty much the 5 questions. But your attorney can help you draft that up or whatever. But as far as the seller financing goes, it's just the human interaction. You just ask questions. You just pick their brain. You just see where they're at. They're going to tell you what their problems are, what their pain points are. You just got to know how to listen. And that's the problem. A lot of seller financing people are like, we don't know if you don't ask. And they're like, well, just ask everybody. Like, are you open to seller financing? And the only people who are going to say yes to that are people who know what it is. Like, if you're asking grandma if she's open to seller financing, why would she say yes when she's like, I can just sell it cash and have all the money? She doesn't understand there's a tax benefit. She doesn't, like, you'd have to educate her on all that. And then you're kind of look like this investor bringing all these fancy things to the table when you could just buy it. Maybe they think you don't have money or whatever. And if somebody does say yes, the odds are they're an investor. So they're going to be like, oh, yeah, sure, 20% down, 10% interest, 5-year balloon, like, no big deal, or, whatever. And that's great, but that's not what you want either. The only way you get the best deals is if you really listen and pay attention to what they need, where their pain point is, and just bring it as a solution. So, like, I didn't say, hey, will you seller finance this house to me, 0 down, 0 payments, and no interest for 12 months? Who would agree to that? But I was like, well, you want this thing gone. I can't match your price. Nobody else has come even close compared to where I'm at. What if I just took it over from you and did all the renovations, and then I paid you when I sold it? And he was like, okay. And then we structured it that way, and that was it. Because he just wanted it off his books. I was like, yeah, I'll cover property taxes for the year. Like, you'll be off the hook if anything goes wrong during this year. Like, it's off the books, but you probably won't get the paycheck for 10 to 12 months. He's like, I'm fine with that. As long as I get paid. I was like, yeah, you'll be a lien holder, so if you don't get paid, you'll get the house back, and I will have put enough money into it that you'll be glad you did. So that worked. A good example of this is, like, let's say grandma needs to move to Florida and she needs 10 grand to make it happen. And, most people would be like, oh, cool. Well, what do I do with that? It's like, well, if that's all she's really cares about is moving there, and she wouldn't mind like an extra $100 a month or whatever in just income from this thing, and she doesn't care about how it's paid off, then You're like, oh, well, we agreed to 70 grand. And obviously numbers scale. Someone's going to be in your comments like, oh, it doesn't work in my market. Like, just scale all the numbers. But say you agree to 70 grand, and then you're like, well, I'll pay you 10,000 a day so that you get your money and you can move. And then I'll just pay you 500 a month for the next 12 years, or 10 years, 120 months. And what does that come out to? It comes out to $60,000. So 60,000, 10,000, 70 grand. But that's a 0%. That's a less than 10% down, or less than 20% down, 10 grand, 0% interest loan where you will own the house free and clear in 10 years, and every year or every month you're paying down 500 on the principal. And she, if she had a $400 mortgage, or if she had no mortgage, is keeping that money. And so it's a win, on both ends. And someone will come in and be like, oh, it's predatory. It's like, well, you're helping them get a deal done in a way that they probably wouldn't be able to do. So as long as it's a win-win, who cares how it's structured? Because she would be, people are like, oh, well, you should give her interest. I'm giving her 30% interest. How are you doing that? She'd pay 30% on taxes if she sold the son of a bitch today. Like, maybe it'd only be on the capital gains, but if there's 30,000 in capital gains and she's got to pay even 25%, we'll say 30%, right? You're talking 10 grand in taxes that I just saved her by spread loading it.
Yeah. So I want to highlight two things from that story. Like, one, I think is your superpower, Dave. I know you say your superpower is networking, but I think it's the core of even that is the human interaction, right? The way that you approach investing into real estate, especially creative financing, is you listen, right? You have a conversation. And then, hey, why do you need to sell this property? Or why are you trying to sell this property? Do you need to sell this property? And then the creative part is not just creative because you draw pretty pictures on the outside of the note, but it's creative because it's just not conventional, right? When you really look at it and you take the words away, what you're doing is you're providing a solution to an identified problem, right? And the second part that I want to highlight, just because my audience is here in San Diego, you talked about just scaling the numbers. And that is the game. The same principles apply in Missouri, apply in Florida, apply in New York, apply in San Diego and San Francisco, right? The difference are the numbers, right?
And the tenant laws.
And the tenant laws, yes. Okay, depending on your real estate strategy.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I can kick somebody out for less than $500 in 3 weeks here. Like, you stop paying rent, you're gone by the end of the month, and it's going to cost me $350. If you show up to fight it, it'll cost me $475.
Wow. So, okay, if you're a long-term buy and hold, definitely take that into consideration. But if you're looking to just buy or sell real estate, period, whether it's, primary residences or maybe you're looking at flips or whatever, your understanding of price point just shifts, right? Depending on whatever market you're in. These same principles, the same application of this creative structuring applies. Is there anything else you wanted to add on to that, Dave?
I think we're pretty good on that. I mean, ultimately, creative financing is one of those things, like, you just got to go do some research and you got to learn the different ways that it works well enough that you can articulate them in conversation without having to use investor terms.
There you go. All right. I want to dive into this last segment with the last couple of minutes here that I've tentatively dubbed your blueprint breakdown.
Ooh.
I don't know if I like that yet, but it's one of those things where it's the same four questions. Yeah. It's same four questions. Famous four was already taken.
Gotcha.
Right. To kind of baseline who you are today and what someone who's listening to this can do to be more like you. So first up, let me make sure I have it. Tell me about a book aside from Rich Dad Poor Dad that has significantly influenced your journey.
There are a lot of them. One that I used to plug all the time was the 4 Hour Work Week, because it taught me how to get a lot done in a little bit of time, as opposed to, the salary W-2 guy who just gets the minimum done so he doesn't get fired. Most recently, I would say 10X is easier than 2X. It's a really solid book on basically outsourcing and hiring so that you can focus on your strengths.
That's awesome. Jeez. Here we go. So tell me about what you identify as the most pivotal moment in your journey of financial freedom.
I mean, there's the cop out getting started, and there's the reaching a number where you could just shut it off, and there's all these things. I think the most pivotal was jumping ship, leaving the military, because that was like the true test.
So burning the boats, going all in.
That's it. Yeah, I went from whatever salary to now I'm paying probably 3 times that in payroll.
Wow. What is a piece of advice that you wish you had when you started in real estate?
Man, I mean, given when I joined, I wish people had told me to go bigger, faster. But that's not that's cyclical advice. I started investing at the right time for that to be you couldn't lose. I would just say, and similar to my advice for most stuff, is surround yourself with people who are doing what you want to do and have already achieved what you want to achieve, whether you got to pay to get in that circle or not. And if you're in that circle and you're listening to their advice instead of people who haven't done it, you're going to be much more successful.
And what is the most difficult or most significant obstacle that you've encountered in your journey, and how did you overcome it?
Myself. I'm always getting in my way. Limiting beliefs, imposter syndrome, or keeping a governor on, so I'm not playing all out, or there's various different ways that manifests itself, but essentially boils down to I have gotten in my own way. And how did I overcome it? I'm still working on it, but I outsource a lot of things now that I'm not great at or don't love, which allows me to focus on the things that I'm better at and do enjoy.
That's awesome, Dave. Well, thanks so much for being here. Are there any last words that you want to impart to listeners?
Semper Fidelis. No, sorry.
Yeah.
I think, outside of filtering who your advice comes through and making sure you're just listening to people who've done what you want to and achieved what you want to and live the life you want to, I think the best way to put it would be consistency wins in the long run. Just start something, go all in, and keep doing the something. You'll be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dave, if people want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, you can go to thebestpodcastguest.com. And I know, I love it, right? You can get a free download of my book there, the PDF, and you can find all my social media handles. It's just a landing page with all that stuff.
Oh, is it actually?
Oh, yeah.
The best podcast?
Bestpodcastguest.com.
That's freaking awesome.
It's easy to remember because your listeners are going to be driving and they're going to be like, what was that damn link? Oh,
he was the best.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right, cool, Dave. Well, I appreciate it, and we'll see y'all next time.